What happened to the Library of Alexandria? It is one of the most searched questions people ask after discovering the story of this legendary library. At first, the answer seems simple. It burned down. But the moment you start looking deeper, something strange happens. Almost every source tells a different story. Some claim it was destroyed during Julius Caesar's campaign in Egypt. Others believe it disappeared gradually over several centuries. There are even theories suggesting that at least some of its manuscripts may have survived. The truth is that after more than 2,000 years, historians still don't agree on exactly what happened. And that is precisely why the Library of Alexandria continues to fascinate millions of people around the world. But before we try to uncover how it disappeared, we first need to understand why this library became so important in the first place. Because the greatest mystery is not simply how it was lost. The greatest mystery is what humanity may have lost with it. Our story begins in 331 BC. That was the year Alexander the Great founded the city of Alexandria on the Mediterranean coast of Egypt. Its location made it ideal for trade, and within only a few decades, Alexandria had become one of the most important cities in the ancient world. After Alexander's death, Egypt came under the rule of Ptolemy, the first Soter. Unlike many rulers of his time, Ptolemy wanted more than military power. He wanted Alexandria to become the intellectual capital of the known world. His vision was unlike anything that had ever been attempted before, to gather the knowledge of every known civilization in a single place. You might be wondering why a king would invest enormous resources in building a library. Why not build a larger army or stronger fortifications? To understand his decision, we need to step back into the ancient world. There were no printing presses, no digital archives. Every manuscript had to be copied entirely by hand. Some existed in only a single copy. If that copy was destroyed, the knowledge it contained could disappear forever. In that world, knowledge was far more than information. It was influence. It was prestige. It was power. And Ptolemy understood something that very few rulers had realized before him. A kingdom that collected the world's greatest ideas could become just as powerful as one that conquered new lands. Before we discover how that extraordinary vision became reality, if you're enjoying this journey through history, consider subscribing to the channel. A like, a comment, or even sharing this video would really help. And if you're curious about the greatest mysteries of history, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next one. Now let's see how they attempted to gather the knowledge of the ancient world. But that immediately raises another question. How do you collect manuscripts from dozens of different kingdoms when every single one is priceless? And surprisingly, the answer is where this story begins to take an unexpected turn. So how do you collect knowledge from across the ancient world when every manuscript is unique and incredibly valuable? At first, it seems almost impossible. Why would another kingdom willingly hand over its most precious texts? To answer that question, we need to picture what Alexandria looked like more than 2,000 years ago. By then, the city had become one of the busiest ports in the Mediterranean. Every day, ships arrived from Greece, Phoenicia, Cyprus, Asia Minor, and many other regions. They carried grain, wine, spices, precious metals, and expensive fabrics. But for the people responsible for the Library of Alexandria, the most valuable cargo wasn't gold, it wasn't silver, it wasn't jewels, it was knowledge. Several ancient sources describe a remarkable policy. Whenever a ship entered the harbor carrying manuscripts, those texts were taken to the library. There, skilled scribes carefully copied every word by hand. The copies were returned to their owners. The originals remained in the royal collection. If these accounts are accurate, the Library of Alexandria wasn't simply collecting books. It was preserving the closest thing to the original knowledge of the ancient world. You might be wondering why they cared so much about keeping the originals. Wouldn't a copy be enough? The answer reveals just how fragile knowledge was in the ancient world. Every manuscript had to be copied by hand. One small mistake could change the meaning of an entire sentence. A missing paragraph could erase an important idea forever. And after generations of copying, it became almost impossible to know how closely a manuscript resembled what its author had originally written. That is why the oldest manuscripts were considered priceless. They were the closest connection anyone had to the author's own words. And that raises an even bigger question. If the Library of Alexandria protected these priceless originals so carefully, what eventually happened to them? If the Library of Alexandria was so important, one question becomes impossible to ignore. What happened to it? For centuries, many people believed they already knew the answer. The library burned to the ground. But once historians began examining the surviving evidence, they discovered that the story was far more complicated. You might be wondering why something so important couldn't simply be protected. The answer is that the Library of Alexandria did not disappear overnight. The evidence we have today suggests that its decline was most likely the result of several events spread across hundreds of years. One of the earliest incidents may have happened in 48 BC, when Julius Caesar became involved in a civil war in Egypt. Ancient sources describe a fire that spread through parts of Alexandria's harbor. Some historians believe that this fire may have damaged part of the library or its collections. Others argue that the main library probably survived. Centuries later, Alexandria experienced more wars, political unrest, and religious conflict. Buildings were damaged, institutions disappeared, and little by little, the library faded from history. The truth is that no surviving source tells us exactly when the final manuscript disappeared. And perhaps that is what makes this story so fascinating. For more than 2,000 years, people have searched for a single moment that explains the library's disappearance. But history rarely works that way. Sometimes the greatest losses happen so slowly that no one realizes what is disappearing until it is already gone. And that leads us to one final question. What was actually lost? No one knows. Some of those manuscripts may have contained works that no longer exist. Others may have preserved discoveries that were never copied again. Some ideas may have survived because they were copied into other libraries. Others may have vanished forever. The truth is that we may never know. And perhaps that is the greatest mystery of the Library of Alexandria. Not who destroyed it, not when it disappeared, but how much of humanity's knowledge disappeared with it. Because every time a civilization loses its history, it loses a part of itself. And maybe that is the real lesson the Library of Alexandria has left us. Not that knowledge can be destroyed, but that it must always be protected.